Welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. How you doing today?
Really well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, man. You have a varied history. You've been in King Kobra, the Bullet Boys, and now you're doing your own thing.
Yeah.
And I know you got a couple different bands going on.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
initially, yep.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
But initially, I'd like to start off with your influences. Like, where'd you come from
Well, I grew up not
musically?
far from you. If you're in Connecticut, I grew up in the Buffalo area of Western New York, and my early experiences were, you know, things that I could play. Neil Young, the easier tunes, with all due respect.
So always guitar.
Um,
Was it
yeah, yeah. We
sometimes just
started.
like there's a gateway drug instrument, usually like a violin
Yeah,
or a flute.
yeah, totally. Well, I've told the story many times, but I was walking down the street and saw a new kid in town was sitting on his front steps playing a Telecaster, and I'd never been that close to a guitar before. I didn't even realize that everybody could do it. And it kind of started from there. I went and talked to him, and we ended up convincing a bunch of other friends to get instruments and started a band. And that was pretty much it from there. I was a hockey player as a kid, and as soon as we started playing guitars and working on music, I didn't even play hockey again for 15 years or whatever. So yeah, that's how it all began for me. And like I said, we just picked the songs that we liked. I think my very first lick was 25 or 6 to 4, which pretty much everybody I'm sure played at the very beginning.
All right. Well, that was the guitar player. I'm going to mental block now.
Oh, Terry Kath.
Yes.
Chicago. Yeah.
He was a madman.
Oh, he's badass. Totally.
He is great. I just saw a documentary on him not that long ago. He's so good.
Mhm.
So from there, you were in New York at the time, just doing high school bands and stuff.
Yep. High
How'd
school
you end
band.
up transplanting over? Because where was King Cobra? Because they called you, right? How'd that happen? That was probably your first big break.
Well, I was working in a record store on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, West Hollywood,
Okay.
I think.
So you moved out to Hollywood.
Yeah, so I moved out to California after playing for, I don't know, 4 years in New York, doing, up and down the coast tours and playing in Janis Joplin cover bands and doing everything that I could to play.
Mhm.
And finally, it sort of its shelf life came up, and we moved to California, my bass player and I, with the intent of keeping our band going, but we sort of went our separate ways. And I found myself playing in cover bands and working in original bands. And honestly, the very week that I had a meeting with Carmine's manager for King Cobra, I had made plans to move back to Baltimore and join this band that was playing in clubs. So I thought that my time in LA had come to an end, and I just wanted to start playing out. And that's something that was about to happen when Carmine's manager came into the store, asked me if I played bass. I said no, and told him I played guitar though, and he had Carmine come in later on when they needed a guitar player. So yeah, it was sort of serendipitous.
That's interesting. They came to the store and just
Yeah, well, he just
within
saw
like
me standing there. I don't think he didn't know me by any stretch. He just came up and said, "Hey, you play bass?" So, I mean, my hair was kind of long at the time, so I guess I had a rock thing going.
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was wild how it all worked out, and I wasn't necessarily a big fan of Carmine's work.
Hmm.
I mean, I'd heard, Vanilla Fudge, and certainly was a Jeff Beck fan, but I didn't know that much about Carmine. I didn't really have any of his records that I remember.
So we did what, 2 albums from them?
Yeah, they were signed to Capitol already. So within a couple of weeks of joining, we were in pre-production and right into the studio working on that first record, Ready to Strike. And went out on the road that toward that year for that record. Came back and did our second record, and then things started to sort of fizzle out. I think at that point in about 1987, I decided to strike out on my own.
Now, had you been writing songs for the band? Like, because obviously, if it's Carmine's band, did they come in? Did they have like more of like it was like a put together band where they're like, it's Carmine's band, we're gonna have writers who write the songs, and you guys are gonna be more of the the players, or did evolve into a band out of the gate?
Well, out of the gate, it was a band. David Michael Phillips, who is the other guitar player in the band, had most of the tracks written, um, and they were pretty much done. You know, for me to come in and just learn the tunes was really what the gig was about at that point. We did a little creative stuff in the studio and ended up writing a song that I had some contributions on. But for the most part, yeah, I got the free will on the solos that I played, and you know, I credit Dave with writing a good rock record. You know, got a lot of great critical review. And for the second record, it turned into something a little different. They wanted Capitol was insistent on getting more of a record that had singles on it, whatever that means. So that's where my pop influences, because I'm a pop cat. I love power pop and bubblegum and all that, you know, crazy stuff from the 60s was great. I loved it. So I'm a sucker for a great melody. And we started, you know, taking that record in a very different vein. And ultimately that didn't work out either, but it was a fun exercise and really where I got my first major workout in writing songs.
Very cool. So from there, so then what happened to the band? Because obviously it dissolved. Was it because of the records and the industry? I felt like the band record industry was kind of pulling people apart. Like that was like what, in the mid 80s at that point?
It
Timeline?
was
80,
would have been
86?
1986, yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, ultimately what happened is after the disappointing sales of the first record, they thought, well, if you're going to have a history here or a future, I should say, you should, you know, we need to get more radio play. So Capitol kind of guided the band in that direction. Well, guided isn't the right word. I would say they, you know, it was basically an ultimatum. You know, if you don't have any hits on this album, it won't be on the label. So it was kind of an odd situation to be in. We thought we were up for the challenge, and you know, we were really hoping for that would work out. I mean, the way the deal was arranged, it really wasn't in the favor of the band. It was, you know, a Carmine production,
Right.
And
That's what it
he
felt like.
stood to, if there had been a lot of success, he stood to make the majority of the money. So that being said, once the record fell apart, I think Mark was the first to leave. I'm not sure. I can't remember what he did. He might have started his own band, or not even really remembering why he split in the first place. And then Johnny left to join Wasp. And at that point, it was pretty obvious to me that Carmine was really grasping for, I mean, he was talking to Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley about songs, and we actually worked up a couple of their tunes. And I didn't like what I was seeing. Like if it had been successful, I would have been even less happy than before. So that was a good cue for me to leave and do my thing. By that time, Lonnie and Mark from Bullet Boys were in the band. And I asked them to come along. I said, hey, let's, and Dave.
Oh, they were in the band too? They
Yeah,
actually were in King Kobra?
Yeah, at the very end, yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, there's I think there's some video. I'm not sure. I think there's a couple of songs too. I don't know if they're available. But
As a fan, I remember back when you guys, so step back for a second, don't mind. There wasn't a lot of press for King Cobra. There's a few things here, there was a smattering here, and it was Carmine's name, and then King Cobra. I actually had forgotten that Johnny was in it, but there wasn't a lot of press for it for you guys. Maybe one video would come out once in a while, didn't get a lot of rotation. And then I remember there was a second album, like I don't remember anything about it, and then gone. And then because there's no internet, you don't really know all the players all the time if I don't have the albums. And then all of a sudden, now here's the point where the Bullet Boys came in. I didn't have the full connection of the whole lineup at that point.
So Mark, yeah, when Mark left, Mark and Johnny, I can't remember exactly how it worked out. It almost felt like Mark and Lonnie joined the band at the same time, because I think Mark left before Johnny did. So we played a few gigs, went to Spain, played a couple of gigs there. It was a fun experience. But when we got back, it was, like I said, very obvious that it wasn't going to be something I wanted to do. So I asked those guys to come along, and at the time, they said, well, this is kind of our big moment. You know, we're in King Kobra, we're in a big established band. Really don't want to go back to the streets and start over again. And I said, great, okay, that's cool. And went home and started auditioning players myself and writing. And shortly after that, the guys came around, we got in touch and started rehearsing with Dave, actually, as another guitar player. At that point, he realized he had too many obligations or something like that. And it wasn't really rounding out the way we wanted it to. So he split, and we just kept working, and the rest is history.
Now, the drummer, Jimmy, when did he come into the picture?
We had a drummer that wasn't working out, and when we fired him, Mark knew Jimmy. And actually, come to think of it, we were all sort of rehearsing in this place down in Vernon, California. And Jimmy had actually sat in with us when Carmine had gone somewhere to do something. And Jimmy came in, he was playing Carmine's kit, and he was all happy and just a kid, you know, he's 19 years old or whatever. So then Mark called him in to audition for us, and that was it. It was the final piece.
So, all right, so at that point, you guys came out, and it was like you guys were pushed as the next Van Halen. I'm sure you guys didn't want to have that against you. It's just you just wanted to be a new band. You know?
Yeah.
You had Ted producing you. Ted had that Van Halen sound already. I don't remember in his book. I don't think I read his book. I don't remember he doesn't really talk a lot about it.
Yeah, he mentioned a little bit.
Yeah, it
didn't really like our lyrics.
Is that what it was? I honestly, cause I read the book and it didn't really, to me, mostly the Dusty Springfield and the other stuff was just like sticking out the most from it, and the Van Halen. It was such a small little.
Yeah, we were anecdotal.
And it was, and I, you know, obviously you're not going to hear the whole version of the sound. He had a sound, and producers had a sound, and that was his sound.
Yeah, he basically just wanted us to go in there and knock it out with a very simplistic approach, which was sort of anathema to how I wanted to produce our record. In fact, there are some 3 demos I think that we did with Garth Richardson before the demos that actually got assigned, and they're, I think, more representative of where we wanted to go, or at least where we intended to go. So when we came in to the studio with Ted, and he just wanted us to, you know, be a 3-piece rock band, and that's how it ended up happening. But it wasn't, you know, it was a bit of a shock to me to listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, so how did that happen? So you stuck in that sound, or you like trying to, once the album came out, were you like, all right, we got to kind of move on from it, or what? I mean, because then you had success with that sound on top of it.
Yeah, we sure did. And people liked it, and it resonated with a lot of folks. So I've certainly made friends with it. You know, I'm not sure how, you know, negative that is for me to think about that record. It's not like it was horrible to me. You know, I very easily came to grips with the new way to do it. And I learned a lot from Ted. I learned that, you know, some of the simplicity is makes for a bigger sound, you know, that mistakes you make or you think you've made can sometimes be wonderful. So there was a lot that I learned from Ted. It was just a situation where I was expecting something different. Like, for example, I gave them a bunch of mix notes that would, you know, make the record more what I was looking for, and they ignored them entirely. So none of that got done. But it's, you know, it's a great record. I like it.
It was crazy. And I remember when I first started, I was like, you sounded good. And the fact that I think everyone was trying to sound like Van Halen at the time, you know, because that was it. And then hearing Mark's vocals, which are good, but it reminded me of Switch Daily Roth. I'm like, man, this feels like a Van Halen band. Like, they sound like they're all polished up and stuff. It took me a while to actually sit down and actually get the album, listen to it, and then appreciate it separately from being pushed as a Ted Templeman new Van Halen band. This is what I wanted Van Halen to be, type of thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? It took me a while to be like, oh, I mean, honestly, I was like, yeah, it sounds good, but it sounds like Van Halen. I heard 1 or 2 songs, and that was it at first. Later on,
Uh,
I've gone to, and obviously we're talking because I like it, but I had to sit down and listen to it. And to me, initially, that was a turnoff.
yeah, I don't blame you. I didn't like the idea either. And it
But it wasn't
was,
the music. It was just literally because it sounded so much like Van Halen.
yeah, well, that was not the intent. In fact, I made every effort not to utilize a bunch of hammer-ons, which I actually did up to that point. I mean, you hear them in some of the King Cobra stuff I did, and in the live shows we were playing, I used that stuff a bit more, and almost entirely cut it out for the record. Uh, so I did what I could to pull that back, and not have that comparison
Oh,
uh,
hold on. It's not in
emphasized.
here. Something's, uh, ah, sorry, hold on. Did I just lose you totally here?
No, I see you.
Can you see me?
Yeah,
That's weird. I might
no,
have
I
to
hear
end
you.
that.
You're
All right,
good.
good. I just had this thing pop up on my screen, some Adobe thing that's never done before. Weird.
Oh yeah.
It's like uninstall. I'm like, what the heck? Where's this coming from all of a sudden? Stupid Mac. All right, sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was crazy, and what really turned me on more was like on my college roommate. He's like, oh no, Bullet Boys. I'm like, oh no, they sound like Van Halen. And then I listened to you guys without Mark singing. Sound a lot less like Les Van Halen because his voice was really geared towards Daily Roth. So that was easier to start to separate a little bit more. You know?
Yeah, he definitely contributed to that because there's a lot of screams and he's talking, yelling over the solos, and
Mhm.
um, I'm sure Ted encouraged that. Um, but it certainly didn't help us in our cause. That's for sure.
Well, I think that, and I think you were one of the first bands that tried doing that too late, really at the time. I mean, unless they tried it with Kingdom Come at one point. I mean, I think it's you try to emulate, produce a band to be somebody else that they're not.
Right.
You last like an album, and then you
Yep.
know,
And there's not much you can say if somebody thinks it sounds like Van Halen, or you can't really change their mind about it. But to me, that I didn't really get it. I didn't get that comparison, and I never was actually even that much of a Van Halen fan, to be honest with you.
well, yeah, I definitely his vocals probably brought it the most in there for that point. So I didn't hear it
Yeah.
in the solos or anything like that. It was just mostly
Right.
the song, and then having strong background vocals. A lot of bands didn't have that same harmony vocals at the time
Yeah.
coming in. That was probably it. But that's Ted. Ted likes having vocals and harmony, and he sings on a lot of albums he would do and write a lot of songs and he'd play on the albums he was in. So,
Hmm.
s- so you guys toured for that album. Who'd you guys tour with?
Oh boy, we toured mostly with we did a Cinderella Winger tour that was probably about 6 months long. We played with Living Colour, Ozzy, Poison,
Oh wow.
um, Bon Jovi that year. A lot of different bands, most of which I'm sure I'm forgetting. But it was a great long tour. We did about 386 days,
Wow.
around the world. Played in Europe and the UK, Japan. So even though we didn't get everywhere I wanted to go, we got plenty of places. And by the time we got home, we were all very tired.
I'll bet. Wow,
Yeah.
that's really you get so because you guys were yeah, at that point you guys were all over the media. That album really kind of broke pretty big on MTV and everything else. The opposite of King Cobra. You were everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because that record was dead in the water when it first came out. We released it, I think, in September of '88. And the label wanted us to sit at home while they worked the record. They wanted to have the record get some legs before they were going to give us any tour support or get us out on the road. So about the time November came around, the record was pretty much over. And we did that video for Smooth Up, and it caught on at MTV. And as I've told the story before, we went up to the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, I think, to do a couple of arena dates with Cheap Trick, and then we were going to do a couple of shows on our own headlining. So we did the shows with Cheap Trick, who were my heroes. When I grew up, my
Yeah.
dream was to go to Chicago to see Cheap Trick in a club. That was just all I ever wanted to do. But we did those shows, and then once we got to this club, I remember sitting in a dressing room area upstairs, and I wasn't really paying attention to what was going down in the club itself. But when we came out to play, the place was packed, and I looked out and I could see a line around the block. And my first thought was like, do they think somebody else is here? Where are all these people coming from? Because up to this point, we've been playing to, 20, 30, 40
Yeah.
people. So that was the first indication that our video had really hit.
That's insane to just not know to all of a sudden to walk out to that. Like,
Yeah, it
to
was
hear the
wild.
buzz. That is,
I'll never forget it.
that was been a great night though.
Yeah, it was really fun. I was very pleased to see it.
Very cool. So a good tour, it ends. You guys had 2 other albums that you guys were together for.
Yeah,
You guys still on the same label? You guys get more control over them at that point?
yeah, we did. The second album took a little longer to create. There were some complications.
Freak Show?
Yeah,
Freak Show? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But that finally came out, and by that time, it seemed like the atmosphere had changed around that kind of music. I think there was, something else was starting to sort of come out and
91,
take over.
92, right? Grunge.
Yeah, 1991, I think that finally
Yeah,
came out.
grunge was coming.
So yeah, the old grunge thing. So, but we did our best. We went out and toured quite a bit and supported the record. And I'll never forget this one guy interviewing me. And he was so upset that the record was so dark and dreary and cynical. And he really gave me a hard time. He's like, I love your first record. It was so good. And now this second one, it's just so dark. It's so depressing. And what happened to you guys? What happened? It's funny. But that was just something, it was our experience on the road for over a year and the music business for many more years than that. So just a natural evolution, I think.
Did you guys all write together? Was it a shared thing or was it like?
Yeah, more so for the second record. On the first record, I had a number of songs, and most of the songs were developed from an idea or a riff, and a lot of times I'd take them and wrote a lot of the lyrics. And by the time the second record came around, I think there was more of a democratic approach. Not that the first one wasn't, but yeah, that sort of evolved, and everything was we just split everything 4 ways for convenience.
And well, sometimes it stops problems, and sometimes it can make problems because if you're a solo songwriter, or if everyone's splitting their sound and the original sound of the band was a certain thing, and everyone starts putting their own sound in, which could be great diplomacy, but if the band was a certain sound to begin with, everybody likes.
Well,
it starts to shift it and water it down differently.
I think that's exactly what happened. Our first record was a different, went through a different process than the other two, and we just never got that back. So it's pretty easy to see in the declining numbers and the way that our career went at that time that didn't really work out for us, and it certainly didn't work out for me. But
I don't think if you had a big hit album at the time, I think it would have been hard, almost impossible to have a big hit album at the time. There's very few bands at 91, 92 from that era that were really knocking them out the park anyhow. I mean,
yeah, it was a transitional period. That's for sure.
I mean, there was like, I can't even think of it. It was some of the big artists. I think like Poison had their third album at the time, and maybe Alice Cooper had something. But some of the bands had already been out there and had already headliners were kind of still skimming across the top of the water.
Yeah.
Before the total grunge thing took them out in like 93, 94.
Right.
I don't think you guys had a shot.
Yeah.
Fair shot.
That's probably fair. And honestly, by the time 1993 came around and I left the band, I was ready to move on in a different direction. I just wanted to do ambient music and acoustic music and, have fretless bass all over my tracks. So I was definitely moving in a different direction. That by the end of that too, I was ready for something else.
Well, that was the year that they didn't really work the bands like in the 70s. You could work an album, 2 or 3 albums to develop a band. There was no developing bands. That's something you guys wouldn't have had a fair shot. A lot of bands didn't have a fair shot because there was no development,
No,
It's just
no time.
it was a framework, and it was a sound, and it was a genre, and that was it. It was numbers. It wasn't a
Mhm.
band, an album, an audience. Oh, we have a weak album. We have a good sales. Fans love it. It's okay. We still have an audience.
Yeah.
Um,
And uh,
oh, your egg's ready.
yeah, exactly. Um, and I was going to say that Warner Brothers actually was very, very good to us. They gave us pretty much everything we needed. They gave us a lot of tour support,
Really?
spent a lot of money on videos. So they were by no means frugal with us, but still, it has to result in something more than platinum, I guess. So
So at that point, when you left the band, did the rest of the band break up, or is it was just like you left and they were going to kind of replace you?
I left the band in '93. I think Jimmy followed shortly after. I remember that we had a meeting where the two of us were just wanting at that point to make a break. And that ended up happening. And Mark and Lonnie continued on playing shows. And I think they did some records. But at the time, I just started writing with other people and working on my stuff in my own studio, and um, kind of finding where I wanted to be. To be honest with you, at that point, I was playing more hockey than guitar. I was having a good time taking a break from
Music.
that. Yeah, rock and
It
roll.
sounds like with all the you're creative and you have your own studio now, and having been in everyone else producing your music, it was really pointing you towards you taking total control of your own production and being a producer. It really feels like without knowing at the time, you kind of funneled that way. You
I think
evolved.
I think that's a good way to put it. That's very well said, and not something I've verbalized before, but that's totally true because that's what happened by the time. Because the Bullet Boys were always collaborations in the sense that even if I had my song, the guys who put their stamp on it, and it seemed to fit that Bullet Boys mold. But when that went away and it was all me, it took a while for me to sort of find
Yeah.
how I wanted it to sound and where I wanted to go. So yeah, that's a very lucid point. I never thought of it myself before,
Well, I think
but
there's like two kinds of music out there. I mean, you had like, some bands are just driven by whoever's the main person. Like, you have Iron Maiden is usually driven by Steve Harris, and yeah, sometimes Bruce Dickinson. But you know what I'm saying? It's a
Mhm.
sound. But then even the Beatles, John and Paul took turns pretty much leading the ship. Somebody's got to lead the lead. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The army just can't run in without a leader.
right.
You need some kind of vote. And I don't think, and you may have been sort of that leader, but song wise, but you weren't allowed to kind of do that. And then once everybody kind of got together, it kind of didn't work like that. Um, so at that point, you're writing again, you're taking a break. Where'd you go from there? Your career.
Well, from there, I started to miss heavy rock again. I started to write heavier pop tunes, and I ended up meeting the future drummer for Five Finger Death Punch, Jeremy, and he ended up staying with me, and we started a band that future guitar player for Five Finger Death Punch would join. Um, and we had a cool four-piece thing going on with dual leads, and in
Was it
fact,
Jason Hook? Was it Jason Hook? Right?
Jason, yeah,
Yeah, it was Jason.
yeah.
Okay.
So it was Jason, Jeremy, and I found a bass player from my neck of the woods, Niagara Falls, actually. And we had a good thing going. It was really fun to write those tunes, but I I'm not I'm not a sort of a go-getter when comes to promoting and doing the legwork and the phone work and all
Yeah.
that. I'm just not that guy. I'm a writer, I'm a musician, and that's sort of the end of it for me. Like beyond that, I have a very difficult time, even though that's part and parcel of what you have to do at this point as
Yeah.
well as then. I mean, nobody was helping us then either. But so that kind of dissolved after a year or two. But some great music came of it, which hopefully someday you'll hear. I've got the tracks that I haven't had a chance to mix them, but there's some good stuff in there.
What was the name? Would you guys have a name or just?
We were going by Brainstem Babies at the time. So
That'd be great to hear.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find something. I think I put a couple of things down. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But after that, that just kind of evolved into a power trio thing that I did. I kept the bass player stayed with me, and the drummer Troy Patrick Farrell, who you might know from some bands around town. But we did even better stuff as far as I'm concerned. It became more of a power pop thing.
Which is what you like.
Say it again.
Which is what you like more.
Yeah, that's what
naturally.
I like. Yeah, yeah.
And were you writing more? We did more of the writing in the too?
Yeah, all of it for the most part. So,
what about the other band? The other one too? Was it more of a collaboration, or you writing all at this point?
I was writing most of the material. It started to evolve into, the guys writing, but for the most part, they were my songs.
Yeah.
So, so then, geez, that was we started to turn into the 2000s at that point. I think I did a couple of shows with Bullet Boys. We got back together and did like a live record, live in the studio. And then I moved out of town. I moved up north for 10 years or so, and worked on my own stuff in my studio. Almost kind of retired, frankly. But I still worked with Jimmy a little bit. And during that time, I met Shane, who is the singer in Hot Summers. And we would travel back and forth and worked on a lot of songs. And those are starting to come to fruition now, finally.
Yeah, I heard that one song on your site. It's nice.
Thank you.
I like that a lot. And then I was also listening to is the other band the Lies, Deceit, and
oh yeah, LDT.
It feels like it's an inside joke. The name, like it's very, very music industry.
Well, yeah,
tongue in cheek or bitter. I don't know if it's one or the other or both.
It's actually those are the last three words on at the end of the first record. So yeah, there was a time in there.
Okay. So yeah, I saw you guys do a lot of Bullet Boys. With all your clips up there.
Yeah, it was essentially us going out and hitting those songs again. With a singer who loved doing it. Shane was a fan of the band way back when, so he sounded good doing it, and it was fun to do. So we're having a good time.
You still do that band too on the side for fun, or
no? Just right now it's Bullet Boys. I'm playing shows with, or at least hoping to next year.
That's what I was confused about, because it sounded like you were and you weren't, but then now it's up still posting your site, so it feels very current still, like it's still something you're doing.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you were doing one or the other, and then I know you're doing your other band, the new one, Hot Summer. So I didn't.
Yeah, I should clarify that. But we sort of intended to work on new music with Bullet Boys. It hasn't panned out, and I'm not sure when it will, if it does at all. So that gave me a chance to jump back into the Hot Summer stuff, which has been sitting on hard drives for, in some cases, years. And that's music that deserves to come out and be heard. So that's my focus right now.
Very cool. So with the pandemic, where's it left you musically? Have you been able to take the time to work on your stuff? Because it seems like you're more of a recording person anyhow.
Yeah, I frankly really love the time off. I stay pretty busy normally, so that was, although it was an awful way to have time off,
of course,
I made the most of it and was able to work on things that I hadn't had a chance to do for, like I said, in some cases, years. So it's, although it sucks heavily and we've lost a lot of good people, I try to make the most of it, like everybody, right?
Monty Python, right? Always look on the bright side of life.
Totally.
I'm trying to learn that song now. It's such a fun song. So with your recording studio, are you actually doing other artists, or are you mostly just doing yourself, or were you doing other artists and kind of a mixture?
I was working, and the answer is no, really. I don't have anybody in my studio. It's pretty private. I did some shows with somebody named Tilly Tills, who was working with I think she wrote a song with Dave Grohl, and she was working with somebody that was in Queens, Alan, I think is his name, guitar player, I guess. and they did some really good music. It's really
Mhm.
cool stuff. So I worked with her for a little bit, and we did a Christmas song. It's called "Merry Christmas, Baby," and I think she just re-released it. So that's out there, but that's really the only thing I've done in my studio. I did a little bit with Sandy Soraya, and we've got a song that, or she, I should say, has a song that I helped produce, and that's another thing that I want to get to and get out. But for the most part, my studio is private. I don't really
Was I
use
think
it.
it's a solo, is it like a solo thing of hers, or is the band going to do something?
I don't think. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I mean, we talked about getting a band together and doing some playing, but I'm not sure when or if we're going to get a chance to do
She's got a
that.
great voice.
Oh yeah, and she's a
Her
great
voice.
kid. I love her, but it's just hard to find the time to do everything I want to do.
There's not a lot of. Plus, you want more women out there, in the music industry. Now's a good time, so it'd be nice to have her back out there again too.
Oh yeah, and she
I,
should be, but she's a little reluctant too. I'm not really sure. I know she's got a busy life, but yeah, I'd love to.
I don't blame any of you guys. If I was from the '80s music, if I was in your spot by the time the 2000s came along for grunge, I'd be like living up in the hills, like talking to goats or something. I'd be like, I'm done. I'm so done.
Well, that's kind of what I
I'd have a
did.
Walkman still,
Yeah.
looking for batteries in the woods.
Well, honestly, that's kind of what I did when I moved up north with my family, and we just tucked ourselves away and bought a house and built a studio and kind of retired, like I said, aside from working on music. And it was maybe in retrospect not the best move for us, but everything, like you said, got the bright side of life.
I mean, you do what you want to do. You write songs.
Yeah,
You work in music for a living. As
that's
I tell everybody, that doesn't suck. You're still doing that. You're not.
right.
My example is always the canary. You're not taking the canary in a cage down the tunnel.
Totally.
Like
And
a
I can
coal
do that
miner.
anywhere. I could, like you, go to the mountains, live on a farm, doesn't matter where I'm at. I can still work on
Right.
music.
That's pretty good. That's really good stuff. So yeah, I usually see what an artist is doing now because some people are streaming or working on albums. And my thought right now is, with everybody working on albums, there better be some really good music out there, and they better sound tight. There better be no bad
Yeah.
notes. Everyone's
Yeah.
had lots of time to practice and work on their album. Everyone's like, oh, the first album you have your whole life, and then the next album you have like 2 months. I'm like, well,
Nah,
you have another whole life again to make another new album.
that's so funny. I never thought about that either, but yeah, everybody better come out guns blazing.
You ever-